Hi, Charles. Amazing to see you.
Janet, good to see you. Ben, good to see you.
Hey, it's been a while, man. Yeah, good to see you. So much amazing stuff going on since.
AI is vogue again. You know, we were in winter,
Yeah.
now we're in bright summer.
Yeah, and I don't think winter's going to come again for AI either. I mean, you're going to see waves and surges of acceleration, but I think we're going to see one super cool innovation after another.
100%. 100%. Real excited.
We're really excited to have you here, Charles. Jumping straight into the AI Summit, let me just briefly introduce you to, I know you need no introduction to our audience, Charles Hoskinson. It's a great pleasure and an honor to have you here with us today. And if you could go on mute, please. Thank you. Charles Hoskinson, of course, is founder and CEO of Input Output Global. He's been deeply involved, a pioneer of crypto since more or less the beginning, playing a pivotal role in the growth and crypto movement in both Ethereum and at IOHK with Cardano and the incredible team there at Cardano and IOHK. We have the pleasure of working closely with parts of the Cardano ecosystem, including our friends at Cardano Catalyst, at Catalyst Swarm. We're meeting with Emergo next week. It's a very beautiful, very strong, and very multi-level partnership and friendship that we enjoy with Cardano. Cardano is moving into an exciting new phase of decentralization called the Voltaire era, which is the most recent step, and we're really looking forward to hearing about it from Charles. And Charles, when I saw you in Denver at the Rare Bloom event last year, I remember you saying, and I tweeted it, you said you are sick to the back teeth, or words to that effect, of organizations claiming to be decentralized when they're actually not. Right. And I found that really inspiring and very insightful. And it's just a great pleasure to have you here with Ben for a fireside chat. So let me hand over to you two gents. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Janet. And Ben, I think you're on mute.
Great to be chatting with you again, Charles. And yeah, I guess there's an awful lot going on with decentralization in the Cardano world, which would take more than the 20 whatever minutes we have to summarize. But it's been amazing to see and inspirational. And the point of this summit, which this chat is a part of, is SingularityNET is aiming over the next couple years to transition to fuller and fuller, genuinely decentralized governance that's involved in more and more of the finer grained decisions going on. I mean, we have voting, and we've had voting about major issues, but still most of the day-to-day is still done by a relatively small number of people who have just devoting their lives to the project. I mean, we're decentralized in terms of voting on significant issues, and in terms of the code development with open source developers and so forth. But we want to bring it further and further. And the as I said in my introductory remarks this morning, the reason I'm so urgent about this now is not only that it's important for the healthy development of any blockchain project that aims to be decentralized, and what we promised SingularityNET we do in 2017. It's when we founded SingularityNET. It's also, I think, it's plausible that we're just a few years away from a real breakthrough to AGI. And I've been an optimist on this for a while. Since ChatGPT, more people are getting optimistic on this front, right? Kurzweil had said 2029. I think that's reasonable. Could it be a few years earlier or a few years later? Absolutely, right? What happens after that is singularity, transition from AGI to superintelligence, which is a whole other topic. But in what happens before that, between the early stage, like the true sparks of AGI, to the full-on human-level AGI, in that interim, I think the way things play out could be very different if the first AGI is rolled out in a fundamentally decentralized platform versus if versus if it rolls out within a big tech company or a government lab. So that's sort of put a fire under my butt, like, well, AGI may really be coming in a few years. We want to be sure we have fully, solidly, totally decentralized everything by the time that comes about. Though there's a lot of failure modes we can see. So yeah, I wonder how you're thinking about, progress toward AI over the next period, and how that ties in with your thinking about decentralization of blockchain networks. I mean, including Cardano.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I always love these conversations that we have. We've had a few of them throughout the days, whether it be in Wyoming at the University of Wyoming, or at various events that we've gone to. And
Wyoming, we had some cool robots in the background too. Right?
We did.
Yeah.
Well, we were there multiple times for various hackathons and things like that, and then also the IO summit that we held there. It is so. There's, as you know, so many different approaches that people have been taking to try to deeply understand how to build something a human would term to be an AGI. You could think of the 1980s when everybody was doing the prologue stuff. Then we kind of went into a dry spell for a little while, and then we kind of had the deep learning revolution, and then people started learning how to do these large language models, and they said, well, we're going to have this massive supply of data, and we're not exactly sure how they're going to have emergent thinking, but we just throw enough data, enough compute power at these things, eventually they'll become really capable. And I was skeptical, but actually seeing the tremendous progress that we've seen with OpenAI and stability diffusion and these other things, it's really amazing, especially on the generative AI side. How incredibly capable these systems are, where you can say, hey, make me a song, and then do the cover art for it. Now upload it to YouTube. It's like, wow, it's incredible. The problem is that it doesn't seem like these systems yet have the ability to pursue their own goals, and they wouldn't be conscious or self-aware from any normal definition that one would pursue. It's also not clear if these systems are capable of true self-correction. I tend to care about that a lot more than consciousness or any of these other ephemeral concepts that people chase. I think a lot about, well, can the system know that it's made a mistake, and can it then use itself to try to attempt to correct that mistake? Because you can ask things like, last night I was using OpenAI, ChatGPT 4, and I asked a question, hey, are there any Mastodon competitors who are open source under a license different than GPL? Because I was just curious, and it gave me one, and I looked at it, and it was actually under a GPL license. And I said, well, but here's the interesting thing that I told GPT. I said, hey, you got this wrong. And it says, yes, actually, I got it wrong. You're right. It's actually under a GPL 3. So there seems to be sparks of self-correction there and self-rumination there. And there's projects that take that on steroids, like AutoGPT, and they go in that particular direction. But you bring up an interesting point, which is regardless of the model that one's chosen, whether it be an LLM or some other model to pursue an intelligent assistant that can assist us in our goals, the control structure of that model and the access structure of that model is more meaningful. Because if you don't think about that carefully, what will end up happening is you have an exponential capability that ends up in the hands of the few. And that exponential capability will then be able to make enormous amounts of wealth for them and power for them. And it's going to widen the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And the problem is you can't compete with them because they have this hyper intelligence that basically exists. And that's exactly what happened with OpenAI. They sold everybody this beautiful idea that they were going to be a foundation and, AI for everybody. And, it was very easy to get people on board. And then suddenly when it became commercially viable, the whole company pivoted, and now they're a for-profit company. And lo and behold, who's in charge of their models? Microsoft, bringing it to market, with Copilot throughout the Office stack and these things. And the issue is that's never going to go back. There's no way like, well, okay, the rest of the world can have what we have. No, because they always wrap it in it's too dangerous to share it with you. So trust us, the enlightened few people, we know how to run all this, and you just can't handle it. And we'll just use it, by the way, to make Microsoft $1 trillion and ourselves $1 trillion. And then we're going to take that $1 trillion and invest it making our models better, in which case now we have an exponentially growing capability that you can't compete with. So even if you can have something that's open source, you're growing too slowly to get that takeoff velocity. So it does concern me very, very deeply. And that's why we love working with you guys on the SingularityNET side. And, we love thinking about better ways to apply governance to these problems, because I'm not fundamentally comfortable with the most important invention in human history being in the hands of a small group of people in a particular geography and not be widely distributed and for everybody to benefit. All it's going to do is just massively increase wealth inequality in the best case. And the worst case scenario is that small group of people could use it to do really nasty things.
Yeah. I mean, on the AI side, regarding Auto GPT and baby AGI and all the other GPT derivatives, it's quite cool. It's pretty clear, current large language models are not AGIs. They could perhaps serve as components of AGIs. I mean, they're missing a reasoning component in a serious sense in terms of comparing fact to reality and carrying out lengthy multi-stage inferences.
Right.
They're also missing the sort of way out there creativity that you get from evolutionary algorithms and other such approaches. They're a bit too close to repermuting the inputs. It just can be really cool because the inputs is so much. It's the whole web, and yeah, they're not significantly agentic. They don't have a sort of holistic understanding of who and what they are. What's the relationship with the world? What's the relationship with others? But all these issues are very clear. And now there's a huge push to resolve these issues in different ways, right? Some folks working on it with expanding LLMs with other knowledge graphs and reinforcement learners. And in OpenCog, we're looking at how to connect a large language model to our atom space so we can go back and forth with our reasoning and evolutionary learning algorithms. Right. So I mean, I think there's going to be work making bigger and faster LLMs, but there's also going to be a lot of work trying to bridge that gap between current LLMs and actual AGI by a variety of different methods. And yes, some of that will happen in big tech companies, certainly, and a bunch will happen in the open source development community. But you need more than just open source, right? You need open and decentralized ways to actually train and run and host the models and have them living live while they're learning. And then once there's a real breakthrough to human level AGI, which is sort of generally qualitatively recognized as such, then you would expect the push to take control of this will be significant, right? And you would like it to be deployed in a way that it's just not feasible, right? I mean, Linux is running Chinese, Iranian servers. It's running servers of political radicals and conservatives and whatever. And no one tries much to stop them from using Linux, right? And it's got to be about the same way as that. In principle, blockchain networks should be that. But I mean, as you've noted before, and is sort of common knowledge in the space, most supposedly decentralized governance doesn't actually work that way. And sometimes push comes to shove in the form of a financial crisis. Some people are like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, you were supposed to be decentralized, but when the shit hit the fan financially, someone changed the parameter all of a sudden by fiat, or they just froze all of this token. How did you do that? Wait a minute. The rollout of AGI is going to be even bigger than these financial crises, which have triggered supposedly decentralized things to be socialized, to be centralized. And I think you need decentralization at every layer, because if people are trying to screw with an early stage AGI, I mean, just like with any sort of attack scenario, it only takes one vulnerability, right? So I mean, you need the blockchain to be decentralized. You need the AI network on top to be decentralized. You need the AI agents running in that network not to be under central control. I mean, you need the whole stack to be democratic and decentralized. And I mean, as you know, democracy barely works among human systems. So
Right.
we've had a long time to refine that. So I guess another question is, you know, what are the reasons to be optimistic that we can really get decentralized governance and control to work well on blockchain networks fast enough to have a decentralized singularity?
Well, so it really just depends upon what your goal is. I always try to break the problem down into something simpler, because this is this grand thing, but I'm a simple guy. I always try to say, like, what problems am I trying to solve? So the first issue with these pseudo intelligent approaching actually intelligent systems is that they give you a large bag of tools to pursue and achieve a goal, but they don't tell you what goals you should have and what things you should value. So your philosophy and your values kind of get you to goals, and then those goals, you need technology, you need intelligence to be able to pursue and achieve them. And so one of the problems we have in the blockchain space is that we don't actually have a common set of philosophies and values. So we actually found this out when we were looking at the Edinburgh Decentralization Index. It's just a case study. So we said, all right, we want decentralization. Well, why? Well, under the decentralization label, there's this value of resilience and self-determination and coercion control, resistance, these types of things that are important to me. But it turns out that those values are not necessarily ubiquitous. For example, if you poll users and their preferences with products, they tend to pick products that are highly optimized with great user experiences, which, by the way, are completely centralized, and products that don't really care too much about their privacy and their self-sovereignty and these types of things. Why? Because it's better, faster, cheaper, better experience, accessibility. They tend to promote that over the alternatives. So you first have to agree on a common set of values, and you have to get to that and say, okay, this is the value set that we're in. And then once you have that, then you can derive meaningful goals. And then the agents we have, whether they be human or automated, are basically there to help us get in that direction. So some things with Cardano, we have system parameters. There's more than 20 system parameters. Some people care a lot about them, like K and min pool fee and these types of things. Right now, the entire setting of those parameters is connected to some sort of off-chain ephemeral process that humans run. You could imagine an AGI-like system that looks at a whole bunch of feeds and inputs as oracles, and then basically is involved in consulting on the idealized protocol parameter. And this goes beyond just a simple algorithm. It's something that basically is almost non-deterministic. It just runs and runs, and it looks at many different things, and it gives you an answer, and you say, okay, that's now a reference point. And perhaps we make that actually a compulsory reference point if we trust the system enough. Okay, so using AGI or using AI as a regulation system to help stabilize parameters around a particular goal, even if the goal is difficult to discern in a local sense, but in a global sense, would probably be a good use case in the short term that I could imagine in 3 to 5 years, enough progress will have been made to accommodate that. Now, you're asking about scale. It depends how much of this stuff is going to be done off-chain and how much of this stuff is done on-chain. So if you get to a point where you're training something and you don't really care about who trains it and who does the computation, but you care that the output is accurate, there's fidelity, you're in the zero knowledge and roll-up territory. Okay, so it doesn't really matter if it's your Uncle Bob or a giant decentralized computing grid, like a folding at home type of deal, or if it's a big corporation that's doing it, because at the end of the day, you trust the output if they give you a proof. And regardless of the computer, the proof should be good enough. If that's the case, then you don't really care about the latency of the blockchain. That's fine. Now, access control prioritization, that is an interesting question, because after you have that capability, when people begin querying and want to use that capability post-train, then at that point, you do need some form of a fair brokering system. This is just basically the same problem as tiered pricing at that point, where Ben gives a query and I give a query and Bob gives a query and Alice gives a query. whose query gets handled first. If you look at GPT, they have a rate limit right now for GPT-4. You're only allowed, even as a premium subscriber, 25 queries per every 3 hours because it's a finite resource, and it costs them $700,000 a day to run that finite resource that they have. So it's very clear that when your capabilities go up and it's ubiquitously useful to everybody, you're going to have a situation where you have more balls in bins, and you have a pigeonhole situation where you're going to have to basically wait a little bit. So in that respect, there does need to be marketplaces that are developed. We just recently released a paper on tiered pricing. This paper, I think, is quite compatible with a generic query system because it's just another form of a smart contract. And then there is a question about marketplaces for computation and for the data. Every time an interaction occurs, it's a learning opportunity for a model, whether it be an LLM or something else. So who owns that learning opportunity, and where does that get contributed? It's almost like an AI copyleft. We have GPL, and there's a copyleft for that. Well, do we have a copyleft for contributions to an AI, where when you contribute to it, does that contribution exist in the open domain, or does it become a proprietary thing? It's not trivial. 100 million users every day talking to OpenAI stuff. That's a lot of contribution, interaction. And these are all teachable moments in human training and curation that could happen. So how does that get sorted out? So where the blockchain stack really helps you, I think, is not necessarily on the actual computation of training, but also it helps you in the access control and also the ownership of contributions, guaranteeing that those contributions work their way back through. It also gives a ubiquitous access of capability, meaning everybody gets the capability at the same time. So it's not the case that Microsoft gets to play around for 6 months privately with some super capability, and then maybe they let you have 5% of it through Office. Everybody gets it at once, and everybody gets to use it at once. I'd say probably the way Cardano is evolving, within 3 to 5 years, through evolution of both the sidechain model, the roll-up model, and the Hydra model that we have, the combination of those three things will be in a position where you could run a large-scale system that emulates a lot of the things that we're seeing in the AI space right now. We still don't have a data layer in the roadmap that would be able to handle that. So you need to build that as a sidechain to facilitate it. And also there probably needs to be a working memory space, so a semi-persistent storage layer inside the system. But there's a variety of reasons why people would want to do that. Shared mempool, mithril intermediate certificate construction, pub-sub protocols, these types of things. So there's still some discussions about that in the longer-term roadmap. But yeah, I'd say 3 to 5 years to get to the point where the throughput is where it needs to be, the off-chain infrastructure is where it needs to be, and the proof systems are where they need to be, where you could build an end-to-end marketplace that has an equivalent experience to a centralized offering like you see with GPT, but could be completely decentralized. And the advantage is that it has emergent ownership of all of these things.
Yeah, very exciting. And then of course, one thing that pops to mind is how can we make this 3 rather than 5 years, right? So I mean, I guess in the HyperCycle project, which is it's a separate blockchain, but it's going to interact via Hydra with Cardano main chain.
Right.
I think that will solve some of these things. Like what we're aiming at there. I mean, there's a bunch of use cases, but one of them is being to put fairly granular bits of AI processing on chain via, I mean, it's ledgerless blockchain. It uses different sorts of consensus mechanisms. Some of them allow more errors to happen in real time, and then you can detect them after the fact and roll them back. So it's based on, different requirements than sending $1 million around or something, right? So I think for sort of working memory and the real-time AI thought process, HyperCycle, the way we're playing it with now, is well suited, and we'll be able to use Hydra to go back and forth with Cardano main chain for a data layer. Yeah, that's different, right? And there's been projects going in that direction, but nothing that works with the speed and scale that you get when you're using Azure or AWS or something to manage huge amounts of data in training models. So there's a lot of pieces there. It's pretty clear what they all are. It's pretty clear they can all be built. The question is, and it's clear that the decentralized governance aspect is coming along very well in Cardano, and we're starting to accelerate it in SingularityNET. It's not terrible. I guess there's timing questions of the progress of AI versus the progress of getting this whole stack to work on the decentralized side, which if AGI is coming in 2035, definitely no worries. Like, we'll have everything super well shored up on the decentralized side. If Kurzweil was a pessimist and we're going to get human level AGI in 2026 or something, then we're doing like in every good techno thriller movie, and we're coming like down to the wire. Can we really have infrastructure to do this decentralized? And of course, when you're really deploying systems, there's intermediary possibilities, right? I mean, you can have some bits that are more decentralized than others, and you still have a viable system that gets some of the robustness properties you get from a more fully decentralized system. But it's interesting how these timings align. But it's great to hear you positive that this is all in the roadmap. And I agree, the sidechain architecture in Cardano was just more robust than anything I've seen anywhere else, and is really, really critical here, because you just fundamentally don't need the same type of decentralized network for everything, right? It can't be one decentralized network to rule them all. Really, it has to be something for a working memory, something for data, and then they have to be locked together in a way they can share state. And I mean,
and also you need
what Hydra and other things are going to deliver.
Yeah, you need multi-resource consensus as well. And our sidechain model is, I think, the only one in the industry that's going to support that. But the thing is, if I'm launching a sidechain, what's going to happen is I need the backbone, the Cardano mainnet, to kind of help me out and be the security of last resort. Great. But then there's probably some bespoke things that I want to incentivize in my sidechain. For example, with Midnight, we're exploring using useful proof of work for roll-up acceleration. So whether you're using pasta curves or Eris and Pluto or whatever curve structure you're using, it's very heavy designing a recursive snark and having it roll up. And if every time you have a user transaction, you have to compute this big thing, then you're saying, well, on a cell phone, it's 5 minutes to send a transaction. It makes no sense. So you have a few options. You can either have trusted third parties finish your proofs or do these things for you, or you can create a computation layer in your system where you can submit it. ASICs can do those operations, and they can do them 1,000 times or 5,000 times faster than you would do it, and you get instantaneous stuff. The question is, what incentive do people have to be that compute layer inside the system? Well, you can create it as a proof of work, and you can connect it into the system, and then suddenly you have the backbone BFT protocol that gives you fast finality, but then you also have this useful proof of work protocol, and Minotaur allows you to sort those things out. I think it could also be used with some of the consensus ideas that you guys have been exploring with Toda. So that would be an example. If you wanted to deploy an AI bespoke sidechain on Cardano, then you could leverage the stakepool operators to run one side of the system and give you kind of a nice BFT style ordering. But then you could have this beautiful, hypergraph style Wazaro thing that's running in tandem, that does a lot of the stuff that, well, maybe you don't care if there's ordering conflicts or these types of things, as long as they meet certain suitability guidelines. And so now you're starting to go to like more of a Tangle style architecture. So I really think that's one dimension that's undervalued, because people don't really understand the need for it until they do. And then when they do, it's usually too late, and they're stuck, and they have to somehow like unwind it. The other thing is, having a good system where there's isomorphism between the events off chain and the events on chain is highly
right.
It's so important. But the problem is, you usually require a system like UTXO, and you also usually require determinism in the system in order to be able to do isomorphism on chain. So you just can't do this in the accounts model. It's very hard. Those are non-deterministic, and they are very mutable. Hydra was built hand in glove for the extended UTXO model, and as Hydra evolves, it's really going to bring a lot of high throughput applications in, where you just get exponential cost reduction whether that be transaction processing or doing a lot of off-chain computing or these types of things. And so it's really exciting to see that product hit mainnet and start seeing people integrate it. And the next wave of dApps that integrate it are really going to get a huge benefit from that. So yeah, it's you asked an interesting question, which is, what is our time horizon if AGI comes in the next 5 years? Well, I would hazard that if we really are on that kind of trajectory, we'll have an exponential speed up in our velocity of code delivery. And the reason being is that I can start pair programming with these models, and it can act as my QA team. It can act as my co-developer, my co-pilot. And so if we're moving in that direction, within just a few years, our one developer could be amplified by a factor of 5 or 10, which means if it's just an engineering situation where we just have a lot of code to write to get there, but we've already designed the protocols, we'll get those protocols done much faster than we thought we were going to, because we've basically effectively massively expanded our development team without having to hire more people, and we're able to effectively integrate them because they're working as pair programmers with the existing programmers. If it's further off than we think, then what's going to happen is we're going to stumble over something in the process of rolling out AGI, and that thing is going to be a lot harder than we anticipated, which of course give us more runway to work on core infrastructure. But from a protocol viewpoint, I'd say that we have this year and last year really converged to the next 5-10 years of what Cardano needs to not only be competitive in the cryptocurrency space, but to be frankly useful at a scale of billions of people. And it's just a matter of getting the engineering done and building these types of things. It's not a cryptography problem or a protocol design problem. It's just an engineering problem, which is awesome. But it still remains to be seen, what bets we need to make on certain technologies. Like you have to make some zero knowledge bets on the curves to choose and these things. You have to make some bets on APIs and interfaces and dev experience. And, we have some great ideas on the directionality there. And there's a lot of inspiration we've gained from other ecosystems, but it's any given Sunday. It's going to be interesting to see if the market likes those bets.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points there. So, I mean, I think it's true. As AI advances, it's not going to be like 3.5 years from now, suddenly super AGI appears. It's going to be getting smarter and smarter in ways that are useful along the way. So if the advance of AI is done in such a way that it helps accelerate software development and software testing and so forth, I mean, then that can push timelines down toward the shorter end. Particularly, I mean, what it means is that the rate limiting factor becomes knowing what you want to do, right? Because now you can know what you want to do, and it just takes a while to turn the cranks and get the software done and debugged and tested. Once the AI can write the code based on a semi-hand wavy spec for you, right? Then okay, you just need to know what to tell the AI to do, and it's not a human level AGI yet, so it's not doing all the computer science and architecture. It's doing the engineering mechanics. So in that sense, I would say Cardano is in a reasonably good place, because there's been a lot of sort of formal and conceptual thinking about what needs to be done, and acceleration of getting it done would be relatively straightforward compared to a bunch of other projects where there's less of a clear sort of formal map of what has to be put in place. So
Well, that's why I say you have to agree on values and goals, and your values and goals then get reflected in design principles and specifications. And then once you have that and a machine can understand that, then it can act as a design assistant and it can help you get the best rate. So it's almost like everything is old is new again. It's almost like the Prolog days again, where you're like, here's what I want to do, and it figures it out. So we're just now able to do that at a scale that we never imagined. So they had the right notion and the right directionality. They just didn't have the right back end to facilitate these types of things. And that's what excites me most about where I see these LLMs going and these other models going, is that they're converging to a point where they actually are becoming that proper assistant. And then I can see where I get the hockey stick from. And then I say, okay, I can't think of a 10-person team anymore. I think of 2 to 3 really good people, give them this tool, and they're amplified as if they're 30 people. and they're going to
I
move
would
really
make,
quickly.
I would say, when I dig into the reality of it, like I could use an LLM now to write an app or a user interface. It's not being useful in coding the guts of the OpenCog or HyperCycle
Right.
systems, really, because we have very experienced programmers there, and we're doing hairy stuff that isn't that similar to what's in its training database. On the other hand, when you get a reasoning engine and you connect it to an LLM, you may get something that can help accelerate these harder core forms of development also. And this might happen in the next couple of years. And then you're really getting a sort of virtuous or vicious cycle, depending on the aims toward which the software is being co-developed by the people in the AIs.
100%. I think Janet coming back on means we're out of time.
He's trying to kick us out of here. Yeah.
I'm absolutely not trying to kick you out of here, and I definitely don't want to stop the flow of genius around us. Thank you so much. But I do have some questions. Would it be a good point to?
Sure.
Yeah, we got questions from the global brain. All right.
We got questions from the global brain. There's a huge amount of chat and activity going on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to ask you the first question, which comes from our very beloved Nahela Uluru. She's asking, Charles, do you have any plans to involve AI on Cardano, besides using Cardano as the infrastructure for decentralized AI? And of course, this can open to a discussion on future directions and partnerships between our two amazing organizations.
Well, I'm incredibly interested in using AI as a governance assistant. I think that's probably the minimum viable setup. So we have SIP 1694 working its way through, and we have these three decision groups: the SPOs, the DREPs, and the Constitutional Committee. In each of those groups, things are going to come before their table, and they're going to have to make a decision, yes or no. So it's very important that they have the best tooling and the most accurate tooling and the best collective brain to make decisions. And so I can see within the next 6 months to a year, building some bespoke pipes. And we're actually going to have a community tooling RFP process. And we will definitely set aside some funding in that RFP process for the use of AI to assist the SIP 1694 rollout. Okay, and that's kind of your minimum viable thing, because it's not compulsory. It's not taking the steering wheel, but it's like a driver assistant. It kind of helps you decide where you want to steer the wheel and keeps you out of a car accident and these types of things. Then moving beyond that, there is some discussion about, could we create DAOs in our organization, which are mostly machine regulated, or decision systems that are mostly machine regulated? So regulated value transfer protocols, where you're applying regulation and making criteria and conditions to de-anonymize things. It could actually be very sensible to do that through an AI-driven approach as opposed to a human judgment approach, because you basically leave it encrypted by default. No human sees it until it hits a certain decision threshold. But you really do have to train those things carefully, and you have to take a look at the fidelity of those things versus human judgment. And it's almost like the self-driving car problem. You know, it's a little different because the environment's different, but it's the same thing where you're now entrusting very serious decisions to basically a completely autonomous system. So I could definitely see that occurring with RealFi and the RegTech stuff in a protocol, and it's something that is unfinished business for us. And there, the most logical plan is to apply Singularity style technology to the Atala Prism framework and to the regulated value transfer efforts that we're working on with Midnight. Then, midterm, so 3 to 5 years, where we're really starting to explore today, but we won't quite be where we need to be for a while, is development acceleration through AI. So Marlowe in particular is our first attempt with this, where we're actually looking at Marlowe as a DSL for NFTs. It's a financial DSL, but NFTs are a pretty low-hanging fruit. It's paint by numbers. And because it's a very simple language, it's Turing incomplete. What we're planning on doing is seeing if we could actually use AI to assist developing a Marlowe smart contract. Now, if those workflows get really good and we get more DSLs, like legal DSLs and these other things, I could imagine within a 3-year time frame, a development world where you basically work with an AI, you write out a framework of the type of thing you want to do, and the vast majority of the smart contract capabilities are implemented through an AI assistant. So that we potentially could do it much earlier, like within a year time frame. But I'm an ambitious. I've been burned before by my ambitions, and so I say 3 to 5 years to kind of give a nice safety net there. But I'm very optimistic that Marlo this year, next year, experimenting with these things, we can do some truly amazing stuff. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute, Ben.
I think natural language prompted Marlowe scripts should be semi-straightforward using LLM technology. And NFTs would be one among a number of low-hanging fruit applications there. And yeah, I agree. There's an interesting avenue there to create DSLs that run on top of a more sophisticated smart contract language like Plutus, and then the DSLs have a simple enough format, and they're grounded in a particular domain, which could be represented by a knowledge graph linked into an LLM for that matter, right? So then I think with these vertical specific DSLs, it will be pretty viable to get sort of AI assisted low code to no code smart contract development linked in with user interface development and application development in the same vein, right? So people can basically put together dApps with the interface, the application logic, and the blockchain piece without coding anything or coding hardly anything, and that seems relatively near at hand. Like no further breakthroughs are needed for that. Whereas using AI to guide the guts of OpenCog hyperparameter probabilistic reasoning development, I mean that we need a breakthrough. We need a breakthrough for, because it's not templatized, right? You're just breaking new ground in a fundamental way.
Right. And we're getting to a point with these LLMs where people can hand draw a user interface and just scan it or take a picture with their phone, upload it into the model. It can actually extract from that hand drawing a wireframe and then go and implement it in Qt and actually give you a user interface. I mean, the level of developer accessibility of that is just astounding, absolutely astounding. But there's rough edges that you have to have domain knowledge to get over. So it's not like you can just go end to end 100% no programming skills. So that's why I talk about in terms of developer amplification as opposed to developer replacement. It's a centaur.
Yeah. But I also think within a few years, you probably will be able to go to end-to-end with no programming skills if you're within a domain where there's a bunch of other end-to-end applications that the system can use as a guide, and at the same time will increasingly get tools that are useful even for the harder core aspects of development. So yeah, that's amazing stuff to be popping up so rapidly, certainly. And it does it highlights the need to get the decentralized governance really working solidly, which I think is coming together, but it's a human problem as well as a math and software problem, which is a different sort of thing to be designing and thinking about.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry for jumping in. So lots of potentials for future collaboration, lots of areas, and of course, generative interfaces being one of the most exciting. If we can do AI generative interfaces to smart contract systems, that'll be revolutionary. So thank you guys for that one. Let me, I don't know how long you have, Charles. I have Ben captive here, but I have a few more questions if you're okay to carry on.
I got about 10 more minutes.
10 minutes. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Same with me. I have a call at noon.
10 minutes each. All right. Perfect. Let's go. So question from David Wood. Can the pace of progress with beneficial governance accelerate and overtake the dizzying pace of progress with AI capabilities? Currently, the latter seems to be outpacing the former. It's a very good question from David.
Can the pace of progress with beneficial governments accelerate and overtake the dizzying pace of progress with AI capabilities? So this is kind of the Nick Bostrom question of the wisdom gap between where the technology is at and the wisdom for the appropriate use of the technology. Because when you talk about beneficial governance, you're really in the context of AI kind of getting into the control problem and the wise use of the capability. So when I make a car, usually what ends up happening is you only make the safety belt for the car after somebody's gone through the windshield and they're lying on the side of the road covered in glass. You say, oh yeah, I need a belt to keep my body in. The problem, and this is what Nick talks about, Life 3.0, and a lot of his writings, his academic writings, is that unlike the car where the failure of the system is a localized problem, the failure of an AGI or an AGI-like system is a global concern. And so the consequences of that failure could potentially be catastrophic to the extent of an extinction event. So, it's all universe of discourse, to use a math term. So if we apply, for example, AGI to the governance of Cardano, and we don't have the right controls or systems in place, then the system may optimize, and you have the paperclip problem or the gray goo problem, where it optimizes in an unproductive direction because it thinks it's doing the right thing. And it is for that perspective, but obviously not for its human users. This is why I like the idea of what Gary Kasparov talks about of centaurs, where it's like half horse, half human. Well, half human, half machine, where you combine the judgment of humans with AI-like tools, and working together, they basically are able to make decisions. That's very easy to do in a local sense. Humans are already demonstrating that at scale with OpenAI. Where it gets a lot harder to do is doing that in a collective sense. So can you build a rule schema where everybody in their centaur basically is working together, and one can potentially override the other with enough feedback? So, going back to SIP 1694, the first step in getting to that reality would be saying every DREP, Constitutional Committee member, and SPO now gets an AI assistant that's been custom tuned to kind of help them reason about their domain. Then some arbitrary point X into the future, maybe those decision agents and assistants come together and they form their own mesh as a governance mesh. And then maybe they get a vote. It doesn't override the human vote per se, but it has some localized influence. So maybe a minority on the human side and the majority on the AI side could then actually make a decision to advance the system instead of just a raw majority of humans. So there's probably
that's interesting. I think, one point to make about Kasparov's idea of humans and AIs working together to play chess is, while it's cool, it plays chess worse than just having a modern AI play chess. That wasn't always true, but it's true. It's true by now. So if you have a system that's half human, half AI, in terms of raw intelligence, it's in the end going to be vastly stupider than the system that's essentially all AI. But the other key point this raises is governing human systems. It's not just an intelligence problem, right? It's important that people are governing people just for ethical, aesthetic, heart and soul, human reasons. So even if an AI could sort of figure out better how to solve the problem of coordinating people, it's like dehumanizing the people to have the AI solve other problems, and having people solve the problems together with AIs. Yeah, this can be a way to combine the insight AIs give with the human process of humans charting their own destiny, which is part of what we need in order to feel and be human. So I think all that makes sense. Going back to David's original question, I think one relevant example, is the COVID-19 pandemic. So when COVID came out, it was immediately obvious to me there were a lot of ways you could use AI and blockchain together to help. I mean, you could have made blockchain-based tracking applications that let people track who was spreading COVID where in a secure, decentralized way. You could also have used tokenomic incentivization to sort of, reward people for shopping close to their house so they're not going out and spreading more virus, right? And at various points in the emergence of the pandemic, blockchain and AI could have been used in various different ways to help curb spreading in different populations without requiring repressive top-down government mandates. We tried to build tools like this. Many others tried to build tools like this. They didn't get rolled out in time to be impactful, right? And the reasons were multifold. I mean, one reason is it just took a while to develop these technologies to the point of rolling them out, and the pandemic moved and shifted quickly. The other is you had to convince governments to adopt and endorse these things, and they're, even when not fundamentally opposed, government agencies just weren't not willing to take any risk on something that looked weird and not that clever at evaluating new things. So if of course we'd foreseen the pandemic and put together all these tools beforehand, and then did some of the political work beforehand, then when the pandemic came, you'd say, all right, we have these blockchain-based decentralized AI tools rolled out. We'll handle this. We've already informed everyone how they work. We're good. You don't need these stupid repressive rules, right? So part of what we're trying to do here is, okay, we do see that AGI is coming. We do see that something like a singularity is coming. We can sort of see what kind of tools will be needed to cope with it. So let's build these tools in advance so that as things unfold, we're not completely taken aback, but we have the tooling so that governance can sort of co-evolve with technology as it develops once AGI comes about.
Right. Well, okay. So
thank you. Thank you both. One thing to add to that, of course.
Let Charles finish his thought here.
So just on the chess thing. So that's a combinatorial game, and it's a search problem at the end of the rainbow. And eventually you'll get to a point where computation can give you the right answer. The thing is, there's plenty of non-combinatorial games, and governance is this way because actually the governance process that's like NuNet can actually change the rules of the game itself. And so you can always broaden or restrict the rules of the game. And so there's this implicit non-determinism that comes in. And so this is where human judgment seems to be very powerful and very prescient. But let's say you get to AGI where it now can compensate for that side and obviously do it better than us. That's fine. But then there's still the issue of institutional legitimacy. So getting onto the side of COVID-19, even if the AI tells you to do something, no one's going to do it because they don't believe it's legitimate. So my point about this concept of having the centaur is because there's still a human who has the hand on the steering wheel, there is the perception of legitimacy there, and thus compliance with the mandates of the system. If you can go from the human with the hand on the steering wheel to an emergent characteristic where it could be the case that a minority of humans can be, plus an AI can overrule a majority of humans, that's a cognitive leap in society we haven't gotten to yet. And I think that's the next step on the spectrum towards AI governance, if you want a completely automated system. Because at some point you say, well, if the AI can overrule with a minority of humans, let's make the minority smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually the number reaches zero, in which case you now have AI governance. Make sense?
Yeah.
It makes beautiful sense. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. I want to be respectful of your time, Charles and Ben. I know you both have to go to calls. There are many more questions coming in. We'll keep the debate going through the day, and we do have an AMA at the end of the day. Just to say a huge, huge thanks to you, Charles, for everything you do for us at the SingularityNET ecosystem and for everything that you do for progressing towards a better, brighter, more beneficial, more equal world. It's such a great source of joy and optimism to have you in. Thank you for joining us here today. And thank you, Ben, as always.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Janet.
Thanks a lot, Charles. And I hope the next time comes soon. All right. Bye-bye.